Lincoln City Radio started broadcasting on 103.6 FM 2 years ago this week, and most people will think of May 2010 as the birth of the station. Only a few determined campaigners will know that the drive to get Lincoln City Radio permanently on air started as long ago as 1985, when the government of the day named Lincoln as one of 21 centres where licences for community radio were to be granted. Ray Drury, one of the founders of Lincoln Hospitals Radio, assembled a formidable team of representatives from local bodies to bid for the franchise. After Ray and his team submitted a very impressive application, the government changed its mind and no community stations were licensed anywhere in the UK. There was to be a small handful of community licenses granted over the next 20 years. Ray continued his campaign, however, which over subsequent years seemed to be a lost cause, and it's fair to say that he lost no small amount of credibility through his insistence that a Lincoln community radio station was getting nearer. But eventually the establishment position softened, and in 2008, with able assistance from Harry Whitmarsh, an ex-BBC broadcaster, Ray was awarded a licence for a permanent station. He was 92 years old and had presided over several trial broadcasts by what, during its development years, was called Castle Radio and then Lindham Radio. Unfortunately, it took a further 2 years to get Lincoln City Radio on air. It was time Ray didn't have. He died in March 2009. It could be said that the origins of Lincoln City Radio go back to 1921, when the 5-year-old Ray Drury used to visit his uncle's radio shop. In 1999, during a Lindham Radio trial broadcast, I interviewed Ray about his lifelong love of radio and his aspirations for a permanent community radio station in Lincoln.
That was Peter Skellen with Putting on the Ritz.
One of my favourites, Peter. He has a particular voice.
He does.
A homely voice, a family voice, hasn't he?
And he makes them all his own arrangements. He's a very good arranger, and you get some wonderful harmonies.
Yes.
All produced by Peter Skellen himself with the techniques that are available to him today in studios.
I wonder what age he is now, John.
Peter Skellen, he'll be about 50, I think.
Yeah.
Ray, you won an award recently, an Enterprise Award. Was this Lincolnother County Council?
It was. It was presented by Mr. Fisher, the chairman of the Lincolnshire County Council.
Right.
And there were, of course, 15 or 16 other people. But I believe I was chosen because of my connection with Lindham Radio and community radio over the many years.
Yes.
And in fact, we did get a plug there because at the end of the interview, I mentioned Lindham Radio.
Yeah.
It was a big surprise, really. A nice certificate, and also a very colourful brochure of Lincoln taken from the air. And on top of that, we got £50 check.
Yeah, that's tremendous. Well done.
Yeah.
How did your interest in radio start, if we can go back to the development over the years of Lindham Radio?
Oh, right.
Right from a young man, you've had an interest in radio?
We have a long time, do we, to talk? I can go back to the age of 5. My uncle had a wireless shop in Lancashire, in Littleborough, of all places. And on my usual weekly visits to see my uncle, he used to give me a piece of cotton-covered wire and say, why don't you put an aerial up, Ray, and listen? And which I did when I got back home.
Yes.
We were actually shown how to make the crystal set, which is a cardboard roll with a wire wrapped around and a contact made, earphones and a crystal and a cat's whisker. And from that we got, I think it was 2LO Manchester. That was my first radio experience.
This interest in radio, which started with the development of the early crystal sets.
Absolutely, yes.
And went through the 1930s, the kind of Bakelite and the accumulators and things.
When the time came in 1939, 3rd of September, I believe, and the war was declared on Germany, and immediately all young people said, well, we've got to join up. It's only going to be 6 months anyway. Yeah. But I joined, and they sent me to North Wales to the Wireless College. I thought, well, we'll have 6 months holiday here.
Yes.
Within 6 weeks, I'd picked up the Morse code, because they drilled it into you hour after hour, and I was on a ship bound for the South Atlantic to the Argentine to pick up some grain. It was a merchant ship to start with.
Oh, yes, I see.
Pick up the grain down there. We came in contact with the Gaspé down there, the pocket battleship, and we were too small to be taken much notice of. In fact, they told us that way with a signal light.
Did they?
One night.
Yes.
So
they said, keep going, did they? We're not going to harm you.
Well, they said, use your wireless and we'll blow you out of the water. The captain, who was a Geordie, said, Sparks, don't
stay away from it.
There's a fellow out here acting very funny.
You started Lincoln Hospital's radio, I understand, in the first place?
Yes, I did. Coming out of the Navy, one looked around quite a bit, and I stayed in London. I managed to get onto the London radio for a while and got a bit of experience. But moving up to Lincolnshire, I found that Lincolnshire, we used to think, was in the sticks.
Oh, yeah.
And
so I came up from London. I thought the world had stopped.
Yeah, and I found there was no radio station. And a party of us, a group of us, one councillor who's now left us, gone to the radio station in the sky, we decided at St George's to form a radio, hospital radio. We gathered records from here, there and everywhere, got a little bit of budget together, and we went on the air for the first time at Christmas time. Just after Christmas, I was called to the reception. There's a parcel here for you. I went down there, opened a grubby-looking parcel. It was a margarine tin inside, full of greenbacks, what I call greenbacks. In America, they call them greenbacks.
Greenbacks.
It was £4,400.
An awful lot of money in those days, yeah.
Left by a gentleman who was anonymous, and he said, get yourself some new records. Thanks for entertaining me over Christmas. Since then, of course, we've been doing hospital radio at St George's and the county, and very well, every night from 6 o'clock and weekends. A lot of hard-working chaps. But it's only on the hot wire, and it's difficult to get hospitals on radio with wavelengths and because of heart pacemakers and various electronic equipment.
It can interfere with it, can it?
It could interfere, so I believe. But now, of course, patients have television and they have even their own radio sets. So I decided it was time that we were on the air, and we formed Lincoln Community Radio. And we had our first effort, and you were part of it, John.
Yeah, only just.
At the castle. We had a lot of support, and then the flu hit us, and most of us went down with flu, so we didn't have a very good record, although I did have a phone call this week from someone who remembered Castle Radio.
Castle Radio, in 1988, was it?
Right, and he said, I never found anything wrong with it. It's marvellous. What are you doing this time?
Of course, what we're trying to do here is concentrate on the city of Lincoln, isn't it? Rather than be a county-wide station, and of course then it becomes genuine neighbourhood radio. It is, yes,
and we've got to remember that we don't want to get too far out, because, as you know, John, we've had offers from the very big national stations to be part of it, to give us a sustaining programme, even the BBC World Service, but we've decided that it's community radio that we're doing, and in particular for the older people, the older listener. And I think it's going to be successful. I think that's a measure that we've made the right choice, because Saga are now supporting us.
So where do we go from here? I mean, this is a trial. We're making mistakes in the first 3 or 4 days, as we're bound to, because we're trialling on air, whereas a lot of permanent radio stations, they have a fortnight or 3 weeks to do all their trials in private before they go on air. We want as much feedback, don't we, Ray, as possible.
I was going to say that, John,
from the general public.
We would appreciate listeners to write into us and let us know what they think, because the future, we're hoping to be permanent in the future. We're thinking of having a mobile system next year, and we'll soon have what we want, a radio station on the air. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk today.
Ray, thanks very much for coming in.